Hi, I'm Dr. Amy Daw from the Australian National University. Today I'm going to be talking through our new paper, AI Hyperrealism, Why White AI Faces are Perceived as More Real than Human Ones. But before we take a close look at our findings, I'd like to give you a chance to see, can you spot the AI imposters? In our study, our participants saw lots of pictures of different faces. And half of them were AI, half of them were human, just like the images I'm going to show you today. So take a close look here and tell me, do you think this woman is an AI imposter? What about this one? Is he an AI imposter? And now him, AI imposter or a real human being? And finally, this young woman. Is she an AI imposter or somebody out there living, breathing in the real world? Now, I know this isn't an easy task, so I'm going to make it a little bit easier for you. In one of these boxes, everybody is a real, living, breathing human being. And in the other box, we have AI imposters. So take a moment. Do you think it's the orange box that's full of AI imposters or the purple one? If you guessed the purple box, you were right. These are all AI imposters, created by an algorithm trained on 70,000 faces to create images that look like real human beings. Now, if you found this task really difficult, you're certainly not alone. There was an excellent paper that came out last year in 2022 in the journal PNAS from Nightingale and Farad that found that people are no longer able to distinguish between these very realistic AI images of faces and pictures of real humans. So let's take a look at exactly what it looks like in the data. Here we're looking at the data directly from Nightingale and Farad. Now, one of the really important advancements that's happened in psychology over the last few years is there's been a shift towards open science. And what that means is that many people, like Nightingale and Farad, are making their data available online from their studies and also stimuli like the photos that were used here. And what that meant is that we were able to go back to their data and reanalyze it. So looking here on our left-hand side, we have the mean percent of faces that were judged as human. And down the bottom, we see that we've got our human faces in the orange bar and our AI faces in the purple bar. Now, because this was a task where people had two choices, they could either choose that a face was AI or human, performance is at chance like flipping a coin at around 50%. And what you can see is that clearly for the human faces and the AI faces, people just couldn't tell the difference. They were essentially guessing here. But you can see here that this particular finding is for the non-white faces in Nightingale and Farad. A strength of Nightingale and Farad's work is that they put a lot of time into getting diverse faces that they were able to test and matching these really well to the human faces. For us, when we separated out the non-white faces from the white faces, the findings are quite surprising. In fact, the picture for the white faces is very different. What we can see here is that for human white faces, again, people are pretty much at chance. They're essentially guessing whether they're human or AI. But for the AI faces in purple, we get a big shift above chance, meaning that we've got faces being judged as human that are AI, well and truly above chance levels. Now, of course, this is a very surprising finding. And with any surprising finding, one of the really critical steps of science is to make sure that it's replicable. And that means rerunning the experiment and making sure that the results come up again with a different set of participants. So in our new experiment, we retested the white faces using Nightingale and Farad's task, asking people if they were AI or human, in an entirely new set of participants with a sample of 124 people. And so again, we see with the human faces, people are performing at chance, but for the AI faces, around 2/3 of the time on average, people think that they're human. Now, we call this shift to see AI faces as more human than actual human faces AI hyperrealism. An important question is why we might be getting this AI hyperrealism. Now, it's really difficult to tell because essentially AI algorithms are black boxes. We can't know exactly what's happening inside them to produce these AI products. In this case, though, we were fortunate enough that the creators of this AI have made transparent what they trained their AI on. And we've got a set of around 70,000 faces that they were trained on, but although there's some diversity in these, the majority, around 2/3, are white. And what that means is that there's a strong training bias in this particular AI. One important possibility then is that this training bias is leading to hyper-realistic or better quality white AI faces than for faces of other races. So how does this play out across those faces of different races? Taking a step back again and looking at Nightingale and Farad's work, what we see there is that the 4 faces that were AI misidentified as humans most often were all white, whereas the real people's faces that were misidentified as AI most often were all faces of colour. Another important question is why on earth AI faces might be appearing hyper-real to us as humans. Now, it's easy to see how algorithms might produce something that's as good as a human face, but perhaps not why it would be perceived as more human than actual human faces. And so, to discover this, at the end of our first experiment, we asked all of our participants what information they had used to decide whether faces were AI or human. Then we coded all of this information to come up with some traits that were commonly used and combined this with theoretical ideas that we have about face perception to identify different attributes that might be driving these decisions. We then had another set of participants, over 600 of them, rate the faces, the AI and the human ones, on all of these different attributes. And what we found there is that the AI and the human faces at the moment do differ physically. In fact, for example, AI faces are more proportional than human faces. You can see that in the example here on the left of an AI face and a kind of matched face there on the right that's a real human being. But the problem here is that people expect human faces to be more proportional. And therefore, what they're doing is misinterpreting this characteristic. And ultimately, AI faces are perceived as more human. And it's not just how proportional the faces are. There are other cues that are misinterpreted too. For example, we found with our AI faces, they were also more familiar and stand out less in a crowd, so they're more average looking than the human faces. But people misinterpreted these characteristics as signs of humanness, which led to the AI hyperrealism effect. A further important question is whether people are aware that they're being fooled by AI. For example, if we're really finding this task difficult, perhaps we know that we're pretty terrible at it, and therefore we're less likely to be fooled when we're interacting with AI online. And so to test this idea out, in addition to asking our participants whether they were looking at an AI or a human face, when they made these judgments, we asked them how confident they were about them. From 0, not at all confident, up to 100, they were completely sure that their decision about whether a face was AI or human was correct. And once again, we were very surprised by our findings. Over here on the left-hand side, we have the percent of AI faces that an individual person miscategorized as human. From 0 up to 100%, they miscategorized all of them. And on the bottom, we have each individual's average percent confidence, from 0, not at all confident, up to 100, completely confident. Each of these purple dots represents an individual participant in our experiment. And what you can see is that there's a relationship whereby the people who are fooled by AI imposters most often are the most confident. Importantly, from a scientific point of view, we needed to make sure that this overconfidence wasn't just related to a response bias. For example, you could essentially get all of the AI faces wrong by simply saying every single face you saw was human. We have another kind of measure that we use in psychology called D prime that we use to measure sensitivity to the difference between two types of information, in this case AI and human faces, correcting for that response bias. And sensitivity can go from very poor to very good. We also have another measure called meta D prime that measures meta sensitivity, or how much insight people have into their performance. So for example, you could have somebody who is a poor performer but has good insight, and this would be somebody who realizes that they're just not good at identifying AI imposters apart from real human faces. However, what we found here is that over half of our participants are poor at this task, so they have poor sensitivity to the difference between AI and human faces, and they also have poor insight. So once we've removed all of that response bias, we're still seeing this relationship whereby people who are making a lot of errors in this space are not aware that they're being fooled by AI. So an important question on everybody's minds, including parents who are watching our next generation come into a world that looks very different from the one that most of us grew up in, is what can I do to protect myself and protect my family? The advice that I'm going to give here is that it's really important that we all become digital detectives. Even though I've given some clues here about how the faces might differ right now, AI from human, there's no guarantee that this is going to remain the case for very long, and it certainly doesn't work in every instance. So it's important that we all maintain a healthy level of skepticism when we're interacting online, and that we check our sources. We need to look for information that verifies an identity, verifies a site, and verifies the information that we're engaging with before we go ahead and treat it as real. This means double and triple checking before we hand over personal information, including, of course, bank details. More broadly, I have an urgent call to action. Watching AI over the last year as a scientist is like watching a runaway train and not being able to do anything about it. We are very rapidly losing transparency. In this particular case, our science was possible because the makers of the AI had made available the faces that they trained their algorithm on. That's really not happening anymore for a lot of technology, and we need to be holding AI creators to account, requiring them to make public and transparent how their AI is trained, including any manual overrides that they put in place, and what things they're doing to make sure their AI is not biased and perpetuating issues that already exist within our society, potentially escalating them dramatically. We are also seeing huge investment in AI industry, but not investment in independent bodies and regulators that are needed to monitor this situation. There is a critical need for funding to science and other independent bodies to keep up with this industry so that we can advise on bias and other risks of AI, as this really becomes such an essential part of our working and social lives. We need to make sure that we understand this so that it helps and supports our next generation as they grow up, rather than causing more problems like we've seen with social media and the introduction of smartphones for well-being and mental health. So how will funding science help with this situation? I've already mentioned that we have this algorithmic black box that we can't understand. But if we do have transparency and we know what's going in and we're able to measure what's going out, as a psychologist, I think we're really well placed to understand this relationship and identify the risks and also how we should be approaching and training these AI entities. Now, the main reason that I think this is, of course, because we have been studying another black box for many decades, the human brain. And we've certainly made good progress in understanding what's happening inside our minds, and will continue to do so. Now, of course, science is a collaborative exercise. In addition to Nightingale and Farad providing their excellent paper with access to their data and the faces that we used in this work, I want to thank our broader team. Dr. Elizabeth Miller and Ben Stewart with me at the Australian National University, and our global members, Dr. Zach Whitaker at the University of Toronto and now at the University of Amsterdam, Dr. Claire Sutherland from the University of Aberdeen, and Associate Professor Eva Krumhuber from University College London. This was very much a global effort as we require to keep on working and tackling AI as it becomes an ever-increasing part of our world. Thank you for joining me today. I encourage you to reach out and contact me at amy.doll@anu.edu.au, and our lab website is also here. Have a great day.